Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Hourlings Podcast Project. My name is Martin Wilsey, and I'm your host. Tonight, our topic is how do we pick a title? But before that, we'll go around and introduce ourselves and say a fun fact. I'll start. My fun fact is I have a lot of dictionaries. And one of my favorite dictionaries happens to be the biggest dictionary ever, is the Oxford English Dictionary, which if you have it full size, it would be like a ginormous 10 feet worth of volumes of dictionaries. But I have the one that's 2 volumes, onion skin paper, and it comes with a magnifying glass.
Marty, if you have an Oxford dictionary, does that mean that you're a supporter of the Oxford comma?
I actually like the Oxford comma.
I agree.
That's easier to remember, and I suck at commas. So if that tracks, then yes, I'm with you. All right, next up, we'll talk to Dave.
All right, I'm David Keener, and my fun fact is I really got interested in writing science fiction back in college when I discovered the Traveler role-playing game. It was kind of like science fiction, hard science fiction, lots of rules, character building, world building, alien species, space opera. So that's kind of helped me get hooked.
Great. Next up will be Shay.
Woo! It's Timmy Galley. I write YA, sci-fi, fantasy, and everything else. My fun fact is that I'm getting my COVID-19 vaccine. Say that 5 times fast. On the 27th of January, so I'm excited about that.
Excellent, excellent. Jeffrey.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey C. Jacobs, and I do write eclectic fiction. And yes, I'm going to write that novel, Project Conosphere. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Coming along, guys. And my fun fact, though, going back, my first published work was in 2013. It was called The Unstoppable Nothing. Nope. The publisher said, I'd prefer you to call it The Unstoppable Annihilation, and therefore it was.
Cool.
Speaking of titles, so
Yeah.
how do you feel about changing the title? Did you agree with the publisher, or was it hard?
Well, no, that was actually what happened was this. That's an interesting story. So I put that this was about the time that Reston Writers, I was running Reston Writers, and it collapsed. But that's a subject for another podcast. Stay tuned. The point was, though, that some of the members were helping me with the review of the piece, to just sort of beta read it for me. And they said, it wasn't working, The Unstoppable Nothing. They were just thinking of Never Ending Story, which I get, it's a cool title, but it really is, the universe is disappearing. It's nothing. It's becoming nothing. But they said, no, come up with a better title. So I said, all right, fine. I still like that title, but I'll call it The Annihilation, because that's, thesaurus word for nothing. It's an annihilation. So the Unstoppable.
It is more dramatic.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're trying to hook people,
Yeah.
I actually like annihilation better than nothing.
I actually like your first one better. See, that's a fun thing about titles, is everyone has different opinions on what's going to work, but really the numbers,
So when
prove it.
So that's the cool thing, is when I submitted it to the publisher, I said, all right, I got 2 titles for this thing. You can do an Unstoppable Nothing or Unstoppable Annihilation. You choose. I'm okay with either one. And they chose Annihilation. So therefore.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The titles are very subjective. Some titles will hook some people. Some titles won't. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
some
people that.
titles are just about perfect, though. Jurassic Park. Come on.
Yeah.
I know you have a picture in your mind.
That's
Well,
a great title.
Nothing else.
You weren't, because if they'd done it the correct name of Cretaceous Park.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same ring.
Exactly.
So Jeffrey had mentioned that you were discussing it with your writers group. How does everybody talk about their titles? Vet their titles with colleagues or a group of trusted beta readers or friends to see if the title works?
Oh, yeah. No, we always talk about that. I mean, it's not the main root of our conversations, but titles definitely come up in terms of what should the book be called.
Only if I have a problem with the title.
Yeah, I'm with David. Unless I don't really know what I want to do with it, or I'm not sure about it, I'm pretty determined about my titles by the time I bring it to a writing group, and I'm confident with it.
Because-
So they usually follow suit.
Yeah, for me, a lot of times, as I'm developing the story, the title, at least a working title, is one of the first things I have, along with sort of like a one paragraph description of what the story is. And so that story has an identity in my head, and I don't change the title unless I think the title is not working for some real demonstrable reason.
Yeah. I know some authors that come up with the title before they come up with the book. Like they'll hear a great word or a great phrase and say, that's got to be the title of a book, and then they write around it.
Well, I'm half and half. Half of my novels had a working title that did not survive to publication. There's a lot of reasons for that to happen. First and foremost, discovering that it's not very unique. I always, if I'm even considering a title, now I'll actually go out to Amazon and search for it. So that, one, it's unique, two, it's easy to find, and three, it doesn't bring up other titles that compete that you don't want coming up. Because like my first novel, the publication title is Still Falling. The original title was Falling. You cannot believe the erotica titles. Literally like 1,000 titles are out there with that same title. So you don't want to. You want it to be easily found. So that's
at the same time, I don't think it's a realistic goal for our viewers to have a title that no book has ever been called before, because there are just so many books out there. If it's
yeah,
I was gonna say Project Chronosphere, probably no one's done it with the K.
Yeah, well, as long as it has some ease to find, that's important.
And it won't get drowned out. So, for instance, I had an anthology. I'm in the middle of producing it, called the Forever House. Well, it turns out that Mike Mignola, the guy who created Hellboy, has a project he's coming out with called Forever House. It's completely unrelated to my idea, but there's no sense in me coming out with an anthology called Forever House when, if his project comes to fruition, you will never find my book.
Yeah,
right.
You'll get buried under that, and then you run the risk of having pissed off, readers say, "Oh,
Right.
I wasn't expecting this book."
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
So you got to be careful of that too.
but I mean, an interesting parallel to that is my story, which I submitted to David for that anthology, was originally called A Night at the Opera. And one of my writing friends, because I do stay open to titles, Cynthia, she said, well, it's got the Beatles in it, so why don't you call it A Hard Day's Night at the Opera? And I was like, yeah, I like it. So sometimes the writers can give you better titles.
Well, and there's an interesting thing right there, because there's one school of thought that says titles should be short. Jurassic Park, the Iger sanction, and there's another rule that says it should be more interesting, like I have no mouth and I must scream, or I can't think of some other
Something wicked, this way comes.
Yeah. And I can see that too, because I thought those were both great titles.
Yeah.
Usually the kind of titles I come up with.
I would say that it goes through trends. I know that in YA children's lit, the trend earlier was longer titles, like From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil Frankwire. There was a mouthful, but that was kind of trendy. Or John Green, Turtles All the Way Down, another kind of funny long one. And then there was a phase of one-word titles.
Yeah,
Twilight.
one-word titles was very popular for a while.
Twilight, Legend.
Divergent. Yeah.
All those single words are basically taken now.
Well, yeah.
He had been on his bestseller list. You're not going to be found.
Like, for instance, for me, I will go either way. My last story that was just published, get it in our Black Market anthology, The Automatons. Just those two words, The Automatons. But then in a great anthology that Marty compiled, Let's Kill John A. or John Wilkes Booth Must Die. It's a mouthful, but I mean, that's the full title of the story.
Remember that titles are one component of an entire aesthetic. So it has to work also with your cover. It has to work even with your name sometimes. It's just one component. I don't think that it should be the only thing you consider when you're marketing your book.
Yeah, there's a 70s trend that I really got a kick out of. You may have heard of a series of movies called The Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
Right, that's a play on the 70s riff. So is the soap opera, The Young and the Restless, The Abandoned and the Damned, and stuff like that. They had a thing for those 2-word titles back then, or two phrase titles, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of my books are like that. Virtues of the Vicious, for instance.
The alliteration.
The title of that's got a very interesting story. That had a different working title. And one night my wife was reading the beta version of the novel in bed one night, and she goes, out of the blue, she just says, "This is your title," because it was in the text of the book. And she was right. It actually worked out to be a lot better title.
Well, she did right. That is a great title.
Poetry sometimes is a good source for titles. There's a bunch of Star Trek episodes that were named after Shakespeare. And then there's other poetry. I forget the name of the poet, but he penned the line, "Time is the fire in which we burn," and I've seen that in a lot of places.
You know, I think titles do more labor for short stories and poems. They can sometimes be part of your word count almost in a poem. Whereas with a novel, I think it's a little less important. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
For a novel, no, I think it's just the opposite. I think the title has got to sell at least some flavor of what the book is.
I'm not really talking about selling though, or marketing. I'm talking about like, think about a poem where the title plays directly into the very next line, or plays directly
in that context, often a short story or a poem, the title becomes more important.
Yeah.
Okay, that I can see. I was thinking more from the marketing perspective, where I feel like, the Iger sanction, I'm expecting it to be a thriller. Jurassic Park, I'm expecting monster action.
Right. Yeah.
So I think people can set expectations, and it's important to make sure they set the right expectations too.
I talked about this another podcast episode, but I think it's worth repeating for this topic of titles. But we have to be careful too about the changing climate in the world, and what our titles, maybe our titles are insensitive where they were not before, or they're outdated in a way. And I'll tell a story to illustrate that. My first novel with St. Martin's Press, which came out in 2019, is titled "This Is Not a Love Scene," but that was not the title that I signed the contract under. I signed the contract under Shooting Cole Stone, and Cole Stone was the love interest, and the protagonist was his film director. So shooting was a play on word with the camera. But during the editing process, the Parkland school shooting in Florida happened. And so my publishers slammed on the brakes with that title and sent me an urgent all caps subject line email saying must change the title of the book, because the word shooting, if that came across a young adult reader's Instagram feed, or they saw it on a headline, they would immediately think of a school shooting and not of my book, which is absolutely not what we wanted them associating it with. So we had to change that. And it was a difficult thing for me because I loved that title. I was very much married to that title. I loved the ing verb beginning followed by the subject. I tried to propose alternatives with that same formula, like filming Cole Stone. Not as fun, but still has the formula. They also turned that down. And so at the end of the day, they just gave me a title that they liked, and we said, we hope you can live with it because we like it, and this is kind of how it is. You can always take your book back, but that's not something I was about to do. So that's my story.
I remember the original working title of that book too.
Oh yes, that was the original working title was before even Shooting Cole Stone, and that had a couple of at signs and hashtag signs in the title.
There's also a trend as well. In that
Which is what?
That's also a trend too. There's been some authors who've had bestsellers with cuss words as part of their title, all nicely blipped out.
Was their title as explicit as I want a hashtag at sign Coldstone?
Yeah.
Or was it more artfully done?
It was explicit.
It was all right.
With asterisks and exclamation
I get it.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so that's an interesting story to learn from and talk about.
And you can go back further too. It's a great story, but I cringe when I hear the title, Robert E. Howard's Queen of the Black Coast. Conan amongst the Negro residents of Africa before modern time. And it's not a bad story. There's nothing particularly super racist about it, but man, it's a cringe.
It did not age well.
Yeah.
The title has not aged well, and the story is, it's a 30s pulp story. It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then you have books like Winnie the Pooh. How did that ever get? I think children would giggle at that. If it were released these days and make a farce of a very sweet, sophisticated children's series.
Now mysteries like a lot of puns or interesting phrases. I can't think of any pun mystery titles right now, but for instance, I read a mystery once where the title was, Sometimes I Miss My Man, but My Aim is Getting Better.
Nice.
It's looking down on the cover and stuff.
That's great.
So I think there's a certain novelty to some titles as well that might grab people's attention.
Yeah, and then there's who is the author that did every letter of the alphabet but didn't get to Z? They passed away.
Sue
Grafton.
Sue Grafton, right? Yeah. Then you have series titles like that where they all kind of work together in a series.
Yeah.
I'm not planned enough as an author to achieve something like that.
John D. MacDonald did a series, mystery series, where all of the books had a color in the title. A pale orange for the shroud, the deep blue goodbye, et cetera, et cetera. So you knew you were reading a Travis McGee mystery whenever you saw the title.
Yeah, that's the branding of it. Titles can be a component of branding a series in particular.
Right.
It's interesting. I can remember a while back there was this Facebook challenge where people were creating fake albums, music albums, and generating a cover using this app. And it's really funny. They would pick a random image from an image archive, and then what they would do is they would go and pick out a random quote and pick the last 4 words out of that quote and make the album cover out of it. And I did several of those, and it was really awesome. My favorite of those was Dirt Nap Saturday, which would have been a great album. And
would be a great title for a mystery, actually.
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
Hey. So what else? Any final thoughts on how you create titles? Do you guys keep them secret until they're published, just so nobody burgles them?
No, I mean, look, honestly, I'll even admit that the subtitle of Project Chronosphere is Since Sliced Bread, which could change at any time. But if someone says, oh, look, this book is Since Sliced Bread, I don't care, fine, I'll just change the title.
So sometimes I'll create a list of words. This is where thesaurus.com comes in handy. That I find to be related to my story. And I'll start kind of mixing and matching them to see if I start coming up with combinations or phrases that I like. The Unlikely Hero, Hero for a Day, The Lost Souls, the Book of Lost Souls, I'll start doing variations and see if I can come up with something that I like.
Yeah, there's, we have talked about tropes before, but I tend to really dig a lot of title tropes that I use in my books. Like I love, I heard a trope earlier where like urban fantasy novels would often be titled City of Blank, like City of Glass or City of whatever. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I named my urban fantasy City of City of Masks. And it's a trope, and there are plenty of other novels that are City of Blank. But now I have a novel that is called City of Masks, and I like it. So I don't mind those tropes. If they work, they work.
Well,
I like that title. That has that's
I use the let's kill whoever in one of my stories.
Yeah.
Common trope.
Killing.
The other thing is titles are fun.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah, I actually keep a file on my phone. Sometimes they pop into your head. I always have my phone with me, so I document them in the file on my phone with titles, and I have character names in there too. I often will hear a very interesting character name and just put it in my phone, and then people I know find out that they've been murdered in my novels. That's,
I've got the story coming out called Dirt Nap Saturday. Yeah.
hey, beat me to it. Do it. I dare you. So any final thoughts, guys?
I think my only final thought is that it's sort of like falling in love when you find the right title. You just that's the one. So if it's not the one, keep working on it. It'll click and it'll be like, oh, that's my book when you find the title.
Well, sometimes I'll take a good title. I prefer a great title, but sometimes I'll settle for a good one.
You got to get it out there too. You got to get it published.
The point is, you got to get the story out there.
That's right. If you're stuck on it.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And my advice would be, don't get wrapped up around the title if you haven't written the book yet.
My final thought is titles are important, and you got to spend time thinking about it. Just don't do them off the cuff.
But the title isn't just it. You got to have a title, but you got to have a good story behind it.
Exactly.
Right? So
Very
don't
true.
worry about that.
Cool.
Well said.
Well, thanks, guys. We'll see you again next week.
Indeed, another finely structured meeting, guys.